Hey y'all, welcome to the Brave Files. I am so glad you decided to tune in this week. Today I'm talking to writer and viral tweeter Andrew Moxon. You may know him as Julius Goat on Twitter. Andrew and I talk about his powerful and somewhat controversial tweet series comparing the way women are treated in the United States to a man being kicked in the crotch. But he doesn't use that word. So you'll have to stick with us and hear what word he actually uses. It's pretty fantastic. It's a super fun conversation about our hopes and our dreams for the country, what we believe is possible, what kind of change we actually believe is possible, and how writing just the right tweet at just the right time can completely change a person's life. Quickly, though, before we go into the interview, I want to give a shout out to all of you entrepreneurs and small business owners out there. I know you're listening, and I'm so grateful to have you here with me. I have some very cool new things coming your way, and I'd like to start by inviting you to join my new Facebook group, Intentionally Brave Entrepreneurs. We're going to have the links here in the show notes, but also you can just head over to Facebook and search Intentionally Brave Entrepreneurs. It's free to join, so come on over and be part of a group dedicated to connection, collaboration, growth, support, and a whole lot of bravery. I cannot wait to see you there.
Frame, art, spirit.
This is Heather Vickery, and you're listening to The Brave Files, stories from people living courageously. When we choose bravely in big and small ways, it powerfully elevates our lives. I hope these stories connect with you and encourage you to embrace bravery in every possible way, day after day. Together, we can build a movement of courageous living that enriches both our lives and our communities. And if you enjoy the show, I ask you to please share it with others. Maybe think of someone who you want to choose bravely right alongside you. Thanks for tuning in. Now here's the show. Happy Thursday, everybody. This is Heather Vickery. Welcome to the Brave Files. I have been looking forward to this interview for some time now. I am joined by Andrew Moxon, known on Twitter as Julius Goat. I admit I want to know more about that as we continue the conversation. Andrew is a writer who went viral after comparing microaggressions on general violence towards women to being kicked in the balls. That makes him a feminist, and I really love a male feminist. He's funny, entertaining, and he's opening the eyes of people all over the world. Andrew, welcome to the Brave Files.
Thank you, Heather.
When I first reached out to you, and of course I'm a stranger on the internet streets, you said, I've never had anybody ask to interview me before. So welcome to the world of interviews.
Thank you. I think I said I'll do my best to be brave.
You did. Well, you might have said that. I think putting yourself out there in the way that you have is brave enough at least to start some intense conversations. And I do want to learn about and share with everybody your history. Are you a writer? Or are you just a guy with a great Twitter account? Your bio is elusive. It's funny. It says husband, father, uncle, second cousin, mango enjoyer, runner of many 10Ks, rhythm enjoyer, but not rhythm haver, tall but not too tall, only somewhat clumsy. So who are you? You'd asked, am I just a guy with a Twitter? Am I a writer? I guess I'm both. I've got a Twitter and I'm a guy and I am a writer. I've got a debut novel coming out on December 3rd. Congratulations. That's when my book is coming out, December 3rd.
All right.
Yeah.
It's fun. Is it a debut?
It is not a debut. It's my second gratitude journaling book, and this one is geared towards kids and families. So.
All right. Well, we're book launch twinsies. That's awesome.
I love that.
People can go to the bookstore to get one of ours, and they go get the other one too.
I like that plan. That's good. Yeah. Everybody go do that. Grab my journal and Andrew's book at the same time. We're going to link to all that. Don't worry. Okay. So you've got a book. Did you have a book in the works before you exploded on Twitter?
Yeah, I've been working on this book since, depending on how you want to count, either 1999 or 2012. And to explain that ambiguity, in 1999, I started with a buddy of mine named Ben, to whom the book is dedicated and is actually quoted in the book. We sort of did a fiction jam. We would just pass this idea back and forth, and we'd pass pages back and forth and kind of write new pages and write over each other and just sort of have fun. And we created this really weird, complex, convoluted thing. After a while, for one reason or another, after we had really developed this out into a large but not particularly focused thing, we kind of moved on to other things. We were still friends, but we just didn't do that as much anymore. I kept thinking about it, and it was in 2012 then that I realized I had a whole story, and I started writing it. So
fun.
Yep. So I finished that around 2016, and I had kind of moved on to writing another one when Twitter exploded in 2017. And then again with this one that you reached out to me, the kicked in the nuts thread.
It's pretty great.
Last year. Yeah.
What do you do when you're not writing or tweeting?
I work. I hang out with my family, watch movies, often with them. I run a lot. I don't run as much right now as I'd like to, but I still do. And those are kind of the things.
Tell us Julius Goat.
Okay.
Yeah. What's that?
I mean, I was thinking of a flip answer, but the truth is, it's just a dumb name that I chose years ago. It does. I mean, it has some relevance in that I chose the name Julius. It's the first name of Groucho Marx, who's kind of the avatar that I chose at the time. Mm-hmm. And Julius is the name of the main character in my book. Okay. So at the time, I was just like, this was a book I was writing. I was working. I didn't really have any thoughts of publication. I just thought it would be a fun little in-joke for myself to do that. And then the goat part comes in because it's a convoluted thing to explain, but there's a comic book that relates in some ways to my book that I was riffing with, and that uses a Groucho Marx figure named Julius who has a goat. So,
okay, he has a goat. I love it. Okay,
so there you go.
I appreciate the explanation. Thank you. It's always interesting to me when people pick names that are not theirs on Twitter. And I'm a big fan of Lin-Manuel Miranda, and he changes his all the time. And half the time I'm like, wait, is this the right? Am I following the right Twitter account? So, yeah.
I used to do that, but when when I first had a tweet go viral in a big way, I discovered that newspapers will actually fill content with the fact that you have this viral tweet out. And at the time, I was my Twitter account was set to large adult goat. So the LA Times had a headline that said, "Large adult goat has a Twitter thread about Charlottesville Nazis." And so I decided to kind of just settle down after that.
Okay. And I didn't realize that the first viral was about the Charlottesville Nazis. I'm gonna have to go back and check that out. So this particular thread that I'm gonna ask you in a minute to read a portion of it. But can you tell us what prompted this thread?
Yeah, it was the Kavanaugh hearings and the kind of the growing sense of Kavanaugh dread that Kavanaugh would be, despite everything that came out, the fact that Kavanaugh was probably going to be seated on the bench of the Supreme Court, which in fact he was.
Yes.
And the growing sense that not only was he going to be seated despite, but there was just this sort of almost inaudible bass note playing that it was the fact that he had these allegations that now he was going to have to be the one, because the last thing that we could ever do was to have somebody credibly accused of sexual assault suffer the slightest consequence as a result. And so, Twitter was what it was at the time, and it had been for quite some time sort of the bucket I put on my head to scream into about everything that's happening. And I was driving my kids to school, and the metaphor just kind of occurred to me. I had been reading. I had been reading. I shouldn't say it just occurred to me. I had been reading a lot of women's reactions to what was going on, and just this sense of a strange mixture. It wasn't resignation, and it wasn't defeatism, but it certainly wasn't surprise. And it was kind of a rage with nowhere to go. And just sort of thinking about the reality of, reading these people who had lived in this Brett Kavanaugh world this whole time and knew exactly what Dr. Ford was talking about, and this situation was just something that was such a familiar thing to them and wasn't to me. I was going off of kind of the shock of something that was so manifestly, clearly unacceptable, still going through, and which has been, you can't call it the gift, but it's been the reality of the Trump era, is these things aren't ignorable.
That's right.
Unless you have decided to ignore them. And so this leads someone like me, who might have in previous times kind of gone back into a numbness, or maybe just said, well, that's not my experience, or all of the usual reactions, to just say, no, I mean, these women clearly know what they're talking about. And what would that be like? And so that's how the metaphor drops.
Okay. I appreciate that. As a woman, thank you.
Sure. Yes.
I'm an ally for a lot of different groups, and we need allies. I'm a member of the LGBTQ community, but I'm a white girl with a lot of white girl privilege, and I don't quote unquote look like a lesbian, whatever the hell that means. So I pass, and I take it my responsibility to use that privilege to get into really important and powerful conversations with folks, so that the marginalized groups don't have to do so. And it is not very often that, as a woman, I find a man willing to put himself out there to the degree that you have. And it gives me a lot of hope, of hope that there will be more men to step up in this space. So I'd love to have you read. We picked a little excerpt from your tweets. Would you read those for us?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Hi, guys. Imagine if one day you got kicked in the nuts really hard, on purpose. You doubled over, felt the pain, nearly passed out, nearly puked. Then you got kicked again and again. Imagine it happened to you when you were 12. Imagine it was a 38-year-old woman who did it. Imagine it was your mother's friend and business partner. Imagine you told your parents and they didn't believe you. Imagine they never mentioned it again. You learned to keep quiet about it. You learned to be scared. Imagine that later your father explained that women just wanted to kick men in the nuts, so as a boy you had to be careful. Imagine he had very detailed, practical advice on this. Imagine you started spending your life planning on avoiding being kicked in the nuts.
Oh, wow. I was so into listening to you read it, which you do beautifully. You should consider maybe a little audio work. Just as a side note,
I'll pass that along. I'll pass that along to my publisher.
Yeah, that I forgot where we had collectively agreed to end it. I wanted more, and everybody else does too. So don't worry, we're linking to the entire Twitter feed. You should follow Andrew, Julius Goat, on Twitter. I promise you will be glad you've done so. But go back, because it goes on and on with so many poignant and perfect examples. It really is the perfect analogy.
Yeah, I did my best to try to gather all of the different stories that I had heard and all the different ways I had seen this sort of Brett Kavanaugh thing play out. Both news stories that I had seen since I sort of started becoming aware of this culture of abuse and enablement, and just stories that I'd been seeing on Twitter. You know, I wanted to make sure that it was clearly violence. I wanted to make sure that it was clearly not sexual. And I wanted to make sure that it still involved sex organs.
Yeah.
Right. So that it had that confusion in it.
So much confusion. Yeah. So you got a lot of response.
I did.
How many times was this retweeted? Do you know off the top of your head?
Well, since we called it up, I'm actually looking at it on screen right now. So I'm seeing 18.3 thousand times.
That's a lot.
It is a lot.
What did people have to say?
There was a lot. It was the range I think you'd expect, or that you would expect if you're extremely online, and which I am probably to a fault. There were the things you'd want to see. I definitely had a lot of guys respond with, you know, this seems like it's right on, or even sometimes, and this is rare, wow, this made me see it in a way I hadn't seen it before. That is pretty rare. A lot of guys who needed to make sure that it was understood before we could continue any further discussion that not all fellas do this. And, you know, the not all men thing.
Yeah. I mean, what's your response to that?
Because
I mean, yeah, but you do. I bet you do a little.
Well,
maybe just a little.
Yeah. I mean, the need to first self-exonerate is itself rather suspicious.
Yes, it is.
But it also, my response is the need to first self-exonerate actually comes from the exact same. It is a bucket drawn from the same pool that I'm talking about. It's a mirror that only looks inward. And so if before we can talk about an entire half of our population talking about living with a constant level of dread, we first have to establish I'm the good guy. And, you know, we first have to make this about me. Then your motives are suspicious, and you've actually chosen to be blind to it.
Absolutely. I mean, I can remember feeling, as I do a lot of anti-racism work, and I can remember feeling like wanting to go, but not all white people. In fact, I know I have done it. If my friend Ivan listens to the show a couple of years ago, I remember distinctly doing it in a Facebook conversation with him, to which about an hour later, I sent him a private message and I was like, I'm such an asshole. Like, I'm so sorry I did that. Because we do screw up, right? Like we are conditioned in culture and in our communities to want to protect ourselves and to make mistakes as we're trying to grow and do better. And I'm sure, you know, I can't speak for you, but I'm sure there are times where you at least maybe start to do something along the lines of what you're working against here, and you catch yourself.
Absolutely. And this, you know, as with anybody who comes to any level of awareness. It's not where I started, and it was a number of steps along the way, and really it was in recent years that the various shocks to the political reality kind of shook me to new levels of understanding the extent to which the system that we're in depends on abuse and enablement in ways that, because of how I'm situated, I don't have to see. I can still choose to not deal with it. I absolutely have that experience where I say, where you want to say, well, wait, hold on, that's not me you're talking about. But on some level, the truth is, it is me. Yeah. And it still is me, in fact, when I'm talking about even this metaphorical thread where you get kicked in the nuts. I am talking about me at some level because I benefit from a culture that is normalized for men in ways I cannot extricate myself. Even with awareness of that reality, I still do benefit. The only thing I can do is recognize it and confess it. The confessing of it, that's what that thread is. And that is when you ask about the response. Well, the response was from most men who responded angrily because I was confessing something. I'm confessing it about myself. I'm not saying that I am guilty of what Brett Kavanaugh did or that I've assaulted women, but I benefit from this culture that normalizes maleness in this way and that punishes femaleness. And we need to be very clear about that. I think we need to speak that truth, and it's not comfortable.
It is so not comfortable. But you're my people, Andrew.
Well, thank you. You're my people too, Heather. And the other response that I got that was overwhelming was from women. And I just started taking screen captures at a certain point of women just saying, thank you.
Yeah.
And this felt very, it was gratifying on one level, but it was very awkward in a way because I don't believe that what I said was, it was unusual, clearly. That's what I was hearing, but it shouldn't be. And
that's the crux of it all, isn't it?
And I even ended, if somebody reads all the way to the end, I do say, by the way, it is insane that I have to say this. And it's also insane that my saying it is clearly going to carry more weight. Mm. That's the one, this is one of the threads that just goes around and goes viral. And to a certain extent, it's because of who's saying it. And the gratitude that's coming is because a man is saying it. But it was an awkward thing because what points should I score for just recognizing a truth? And do you see what I'm saying?
I totally see what you're saying, but I also know beyond a shadow of a doubt that this could only have come from a man, because if I'd tried it, I would have been shamed and laughed out of the room. And certainly not even picked up by any significant number of people. A woman could never, ever have done that. And I don't know that a black man could have done it either. I think it needed to be a white man.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. And I think that's the
it's fucked up.
It is. It's the element of confession that I'm talking about. Yeah. And I think that's The angry responses were pretty angry, and I had some fun with them.
You did. You
them.
did. You guys, when you go and read, and you see Andrew's responses, your responses were fantastic. And really you just didn't suffer any fools or any bullshit from them. You're like, well, it sounds like your problem, or I guess you're not going to get better, or whatever it was. Like, you were just very flippant. It was great. You can't feed into any of that. Like,
no, and I also am not a very strong believer that you change minds through any kind of argument or debate. I think people change their own minds. I think the mission here is not to inspire some individual action, but to create an atmosphere.
Well, an atmosphere for people to think outside of their own norm, right? I do think that conversation is about the only way we create change, but having an angry or conversation isn't going to work, and having a conversation with somebody who is not even remotely willing to open their mind to a new idea is also not going to work.
Yeah, I know. I don't disagree with that. I think that conversation will create change. It's just a question of how it creates change. I think it's more debate that I'm skeptical of. I don't think that you argue anybody into submission, into changing their minds. I think what you do, the word I used was atmosphere. You create a space where things are said that need to be said, and that can start to work on people.
Yeah. Why pick up this kind of work? And especially, I know you said Twitter is what Twitter is, and it sounds like you're just a good old-fashioned activist, and that's somebody I adore. But why is this important to you?
I think we touched on it. I went to bed the night of the election, and things were different for me.
I agree. God, that was a bad day.
It was a bad day, but it was also a bad series of months ahead of that, because it was just a growing realization that I had a dim view of the political channels that had led to Trump, and that whole political movement. I'd had a dim view, but it became clear that my assessment had been far too generous.
Yes.
So, if you ask, well, what makes this work important to me? I think it became clear to me that it was going to be needed. It was going to be necessary for people to speak as loudly as they could. And at the time I had, I think, 400 followers on Twitter. I mostly used it to, screw around with my friends and tell jokes and as the election had kind of run up and in the years before that I had probably gotten a bit more political because there were all of these touchstones along the way that had been kind of horrifying and so forth. But it was at that point that I really decided, and the touchstone for me has been there's a series of quotes from Elie Wiesel, the survivor of the death camps and the Nobel-winning writer, that talks about how it's necessary to take sides, particularly in these contexts, and how silence only helps the oppressor, never the oppressed. The opposite of love is not hate, but indifference. Yes. And those things really hit home for me. So I started writing a lot of things long form. Those are on my blog, but I started really thinking about, as deeply as I could, about what the underlying premises were behind a lot of the arguments that I would see, or a lot of the propositions that would come up. And just like, these things are very wrong, very bad. There must be some lies underneath it. There must be some, what is the spirit of this thing that's animating it? And let's name it, and then let's reframe around it. And so that's really what I've been doing as much as possible with Twitter when I can. A lot of my threads are around it. The ones that are strongest, I think, are around it. There's also a lot of, just calling Donald Trump a shithead in his mentions, or telling him he's going to jail, or
I hope so.
it's my bucket that I put on my head and scream into. And then I also do movie reviews and dad jokes and things like that to kind of even things out and smooth it out a little bit. But yeah, that's sort of why it's important to me. I don't know if I'm an activist. You said activist. I've only recently started doing things like knocking on doors and kind of organizing with the local Democrats here and those sorts of things. But I think that what I can do is get to that essence of what's behind something and name it and reframe it. I do have that skill, so I employ it as much as I can.
Do you think we can actually change it? Like, do you believe that in 10 years, 20 years, an analogy like getting kicked in the nuts will no longer be valid because it maybe won't be an issue anymore?
Yeah, I absolutely think we can change it. Things have changed for the better before, and sometimes things change very quickly and all at once.
Yeah.
I think the task for those of us that sit with a lot more privilege is to always remember that there is a very firm opposition to all of that. And they will, if you have a lot of privilege, if you're like me, they'll be very ingratiating.
Yeah.
There's really, that the whole Donald Trump thing is going to never really have much trouble with me. And so I think that's the work for me to do, but it absolutely can change if we fight that fight.
Yeah, I'm in.
And most importantly, those of us who, I don't want to say it that way. I'll make it sound like we're the most important ones, but from my perspective, it is most important to me to remember to do that.
Yes.
So I'll put it that way.
Yeah. We are not the most important ones, but we are the most obligated to use our positions of privilege to support others.
That's well put. Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. And to listen.
Yes.
And
believe. That's the whole thing with Dr. Ford is, even my mom said, well, we don't really know. And I said, but why do we always assume that the bad thing didn't happen? Why can't we just believe women or believe people of color or believe that Black people are targeted by the police? We have to believe them first.
Yeah.
Sorry, get me all hot and bothered.
and not only that, but he showed himself.
Yes. Oh, yes. Ugh, what a creep.
He absolutely showed himself. He showed in that moment. It is obviously important to believe Dr. Ford, and it is obviously in these cases important to keep the frame accurate, because the frame very quickly shifts from, well, we don't know what happened to, he's being railroaded to, he's being treated so badly to, his life is being destroyed. His life's not being destroyed.
No part of his life was destroyed. He's a Supreme Court justice.
But then he gets up and he does his red-faced, cannot believe that he's actually being questioned thing, and you see it. Mm-hmm. You see him. You see the person who does that, and it's something that you cannot miss again unless you have decided to miss it.
Yeah.
And we see this again. As we speak, they're doing impeachment hearings.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to follow you on Twitter in that regard.
We're all going to I guess pretend like we don't know that that the president has committed a lot of crimes and admitted to them.
Yeah.
It's all gonna get treated as though it were still an open question somehow. And it's sort of crazy making. And you just kind of have to keep putting it back on the frame and saying, this is something that, these are facts that are not really up for debate. The fact that Brett Kavanaugh is somebody who's unfit to serve on the bench isn't a question anymore. And the only question is, who cares? Literally, that is the question. Who cares?
And clearly nobody that has a vote.
That's correct. People, well, that's the nice thing about these moments, I guess, if you want to find a silver lining, is you can now see who cares.
Right.
And again, with the president, it is not a question of whether he's a criminal. He is a criminal. He's talked about the crimes that he's done, and he's talked about the crimes that he wishes he could do, and he's set things up for future crimes. And then he points to the evidence of the crime that he released and tells us to read it as though it were exonerative. And again, the question is going to be, who cares? And we will see. And it will probably be rather disappointing.
Yes.
And but we will keep reframing it, and we will keep pointing to the underlying truths.
I love that.
Yeah.
I get to ask this question in every episode, and it feels a little bit out of left field based on the conversation we've had, but I'd like to tie it in. I'd love to know how you celebrate successes, and that can mean anything. It can mean this crazy viral thread. You've had a couple of those now. It can mean finally taking your book to being published, or just little wins. Maybe it's people showing themselves, and we know who we're dealing with, and we know who cares, and we know, how do you celebrate something that you consider successful?
I probably actually struggle with this one because there have been a lot of steps along the path in terms of, let's use the book as an example, where I get the book deal and I say, well, but we still have to do the work here. We've got to edit it. Okay, now we've edited it, we've submitted it. All right, well, it's still got to get to market, and so on and so forth. Well, now I've actually got the finished hardcover sitting right here beside me, and I think it is important to stop and recognize these things. My daughter just got her black belt in Taekwondo.
Congrats!
And that was really awesome, and that was, I think she was at that for 4 years. It may have been 5 years. It was a really wonderful thing, and we're going to go out and celebrate. And so I want to think about ways of doing that. I think one of the reasons is that I've kind of recalibrated success, at least around the book. I think it's my first blog post that I write about this, and it's before Twitter happened, and it's before there was any indication that there was going to be a book deal. It was just me talking about how I had finished it and what I had learned. And one of the main takeaways for me was that success for me, the way that I wrote the book was I got up every morning at 4:00 and I wrote until 6. And then I took my kids to school, and then I went to work, and then the next day I did it again.
Wow. And
I said, so here's what success is for me. I get up at 4 a.m. and I get to write for 2 hours. And then I get to take my kids to school, and then I get to go to work. And that has become success for me, is just the process of doing it, and the ability to do it is a gift. And it's one that I truly enjoy. So the fact that all of the rest of this has come out of it is great, and it should be celebrated. And I'll do something. I'll figure something out.
I love it.
It'll be something with the family, and maybe we'll go someplace special. We'll do something special together. But those are the things. The as much as I can, those daily events and those daily touch points. Those are the measure of success.
I love that.
So I kind of celebrate them by doing them.
That's what I was just going to say. I really love that. I write, and I wow, 4 to 6. I mean, you have my admiration there because I like to sleep, and I don't know how old your kids are, but I start bedtime at 7 and it doesn't end until about 11:30 every night. So, but then I get all up in my head, right? And think, well, I must not really mean it. If I'm not willing to get up at 4 and write, I must not care that much, which is not the truth. But what I heard you say was that the continuation of that is a celebration of success. The fact that it fills you up and it means you're capable and you have this ability. And by doing it repeatedly, that's a celebration of it in and of itself.
Yeah, that's right. That's well put.
I love that. I think it's so great. Are you going to read Dr. Ford's book?
I've got so many stacked up.
I feel that.
I didn't have it in my view screen yet, but perhaps I should.
I'm looking forward to reading it.
I suppose to one extent, I feel almost it's owed that attention be paid. To another extent, I fully believe her.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I don't want to read it because I don't believe her. I want to read it because I want to honor her.
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah. I think that's apt. I will put it on my list, and one of these days I sure hope that I find some kind of time machine.
I feel it. I've got a stack of books as well. This year I did the 12 books in 12 months challenge, where I picked 12 books, dusty books off my shelves, and committed to reading them. And I wasn't going to do it because who the fuck has time to read 12 books? And then this was in January. And then Obama's list of like the top 50 books out of whatever, 200 that he read that he most enjoyed. I was like, you know what?
Thanks a lot, Obama.
Yeah. If he could do it, I can do it. And I made a couple of little changes in my daily routine. And I will tell you, I am about to finish book 27 and I'm pretty freaking proud of it. Yeah. But the stack has grown. I got the stack down. And now that I'm like, oh, well, I can make time to read and I love it and I'm learning and I feel like I'm growing so much. And now there's like 10 stacks of books. I'm like, wait.
Yeah, no, it never goes anywhere. There's always plenty more.
Yeah. So you had mentioned sort of that you're new to this work since the 2016 election, which I hear from a lot of people. And while I'm not new to it, I'm more active in it because of the election and what's happened since then. But from this work that you're now starting to do, what is your favorite charitable organization to support?
I have a few. I mean, I would recommend anybody who's concerned about independent journalism to go to ProPublica. Okay. There's a number of really excellent organizations that are helping at the border. The ones that I've chosen to name here are RACES, that's the Refugee and Immigrant Center for Education and Legal Services, and the Kids in Need of Defense Fund. And I'd be remiss if I don't point out, shout out the Southern Poverty Law Center, who just dropped a bomb on Stephen Miller's rather girthy forehead yesterday.
You want to tell everybody in case they haven't?
Yeah, Stephen Miller is a white supremacist, and we've all known that for a really long time. But that little asshole wrote some emails, and about 900 of them got released, and they got printed up by the Southern Poverty Law Center.
So awesome. And
it's incontrovertible proof that one of the president's senior advisors, who has been driving this absolutely atrocity-filled border policy, is a goddamned white supremacist. And again, anyone who doesn't know it doesn't want to know it.
Yeah.
So that's what's going on there.
Woo. Yeah, great organizations. I'm supportive and a fan of all of them. So listeners, every week I ask you to call. I call you to action. Get to know them. If you have something to give, money, time, even if it's just a couple of shares on social media, please do so. We are called at this time, as Andrew indicated earlier, and as I've said for many, many years, to be vocal. It is no longer okay to sit back and be quiet. It is time to step up, and you cannot be a bystander. You have to be an upstander, or you're part of the problem. So take advantage of the opportunities available to you because you know better. And when we know better, we're required to do better.
There you go.
Andrew, will you share your 3 words with us one last time?
Frame, art, spirit.
So thank you for that. When you shared your words with me prior to starting the interview, I said, okay, we might need to talk about those. And you did a great job of bringing frame into the conversation. I was like, check, excellent, well done. And you're right about that. The frame is so important. Can you just quickly speak to art and spirit and why you chose those words?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So one of the main things that I have done in terms of looking at how I looked at things and just how I see our culture looking at things and reframing them, I put into a quite long series of blog posts called Bubbles.
Nice.
About how my bubble got popped, about the bubbles we're in, and kind of recontextualizing this whole talk around bubbles that I see as well. And I begin with a couple of words. I begin with the word art and I begin with the word spirit. And with art, what I begin with is the idea that every human being is a work of irreplaceable art.
I love that.
Of unsurpassable value. And that is the foundation of my ethic. I think it should be the foundation of how we negotiate this grim reality and how we navigate some of the seeming complexities as we use that as a template. And then spirit, that goes sort of to what I was talking about, where I say, well, what is the thing under the thing? What is this? When you say spirit, people sometimes think that you're going to maybe sort of a woo sort of place. It's not, I don't think that you have to be somebody who considers themselves spiritual to understand what I mean by spirit. I think you can see it anywhere. It's when we talk about somebody who perhaps follows the letter of the law but breaks the spirit. Or if you go to a sporting event and you see that the other one team is playing with a lot more spirit, or their fans have a lot of spirit, or perhaps these days if you go to a political rally, you can see that there is definitely a spirit motivating that. And so when I think of spirit, I think of what is it's undeniable that when people come together, there is some kind of motivating, energizing force. You really don't have to believe in spiritualism to believe that. I'm not advocating that you do. I'm just saying, like, that's something that we know and we can talk about in a completely agnostic way. And if I drive down to what is the spirit driving this thing right now, I identify foundational lies, 3 of them. The first is that we don't belong to each other. It's a denial that there is some kind of social contract, some kind of connectivity that we have to one another, and that what happens to one actually affects the other. The second is that life is something that has to be earned, and we see this all over the place. And for the most part, the answer is profit is how we earn it. But just this idea that some things happen to some people, and all we really have to do is figure out why that's okay, and then we can stop caring. And we can certainly do that because we don't belong to each other. And then the third one is that violence redeems. And so those are kind of the pillars that I go after. Those are the trees I'm trying to cut down.
Wow. I was so not anticipating that, and it's incredible.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, it's those. I'm going to sit with that for quite some time. Those 3 lies do seem to be pervasive, and they seem to permeate about everything. And
if you want to read literally thousands and thousands of words about it, you can go to my blog and check out the bubbles.
Yes, you can share that link. What is your blog?
It's armoxon.com.
And we'll, of course, have that in the show notes as well. But it's incredible work. It's admirable work. I think it's brave work because calling out truths does not always get us friends.
Well, thank you, Heather. Yeah, and actually, it doesn't always. Although the people it makes enemies of, I'm happy to have.
I feel that. I think you kind of know you've arrived when people start to get really pissed about something you say when you're doing this kind of work.
I don't hate to see it, and it has made a lot of new friends, and I'm very happy to have them. So
yeah,
I think it's been a very good experience.
I love it. And I am just so glad to have met you.
Likewise.
I'd like to be friends. Can we be friends, Andrew?
Absolutely. Let's be friends.
Let's be friends. I would really like that. I could continue this conversation. I could have many, many more. And I hope that we have the opportunity to do so. I love what you're up to. If at any point there's ever anything I can do to support or work with you on any of this from an advocacy standpoint, do not hesitate to reach out.
I won't. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're very, very welcome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Friends, this was great. I don't want to hang up this call. I don't want to end the episode, but you won't listen forever. I know how that goes. But I just want to remind you that we all have the ability for powerful impact. And part of becoming a true ally is in speaking up when you have a platform to do so. So as you walk away from this conversation today, I urge you to think about who you can talk to, who can you challenge, connect with, what minds can you open because of your unique position in life. And we all have one. And last but not least, folks like Andrew and I, we put our hearts and our souls into our work, and it feels really damn good when people appreciate it. And that is why we both have Patreon pages. Patreon is this really great platform that connects artists with people who like to support artists. So do me a favor. Check out our Patreon pages today. See if there's something that catches your eye and consider supporting the hard work that we put into our work every single day. You can find my show at patreon.com/bravefiles, and you can find Andrew at patreon.com/armoxon. I love having you all with me. This was a really, really fantastic episode, folks. I hope you'll share it with everybody that you know. No matter where you're going today or what you're doing, this is Heather Vickery reminding you to step up and choose bravely. Today's show was brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/thebravefiles and browse their unmatched selection of audio programs. Download a title of your choice for free and start listening. It's that simple. Just head to audiotrial.com/thebravefiles. You've been listening to The Brave Files, stories from people living courageously. To learn more about the show, find our show notes, or get some great bonus content, visit thebravefilespodcast.com. And we'd love to know what you think. You can give us a call at 312-646-0205. Let us know your thoughts on the episode, the show in general, or maybe share with us how you're out choosing bravely. This episode is brought to you by Vickery & Co. Success Coaching, coaching that helps you maintain a life well lived and a business well run. Learn more at vickeryandco.com. Our music is produced by Matt Lewis. Follow him on Instagram at mattmmusic or visit his website, theunionband.com. We couldn't do any of this without our extraordinary audio engineer, Andrew Olson. Learn more about him and check out his work at findandrewolson.com. And special thanks to our associate producer, Kim Statler. I'm your host and executive producer, Heather Vickery. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week.